the deceased are alive. The Soviet physicist Alexei Priima described the path of the soul after earthly life. One of the most common arguments against the idea of life after death is the claim that no one has returned from the afterlife. This is, of course, a convincing and difficult to refute argument. But at the end of the 20th century in the Soviet Union, things began to happen that were kept silent about for a long time. No one was allowed into the archives, the research was classified, because it could destroy the familiar worldview of millions of people. In closed laboratories, where only KGB employees and trusted scientists had access, they began to collect testimonies of people who had survived clinical death. Officially, this was called the study of anomalous contact situations. Unofficially, experiments with the soul. Alexei Priima headed this center, and it was there that he heard stories that, if they had become known to the whole world at that time, could have overturned the understanding of life and death. These people stood at the boundary of two worlds and returned to tell about it, said physicist Alexei Priima. He believed that the testimonies of people who had experienced this were the most important evidence that our physical world is not the only place where we exist. He noted, many of these people felt an incredible lightness and peace, as if freed from physical limitations. But not all. Many faced much darker and more frightening experiences. And now ask yourself, if it were you in such a state, what would you see? Light or darkness? In the 1990s, Alexei Priima officially headed the Center for the Study of Anomalous Contact Situations, but unofficially it was there that they continued to accumulate materials, which were later called Case Number 42, strictly classified KGB dossiers. People who had experienced death described the same thing, a tunnel, light, a meeting with deceased relatives, but there were also others, terrifying visions about which people were afraid even to speak. Using modern equipment and hypnotic techniques, Priima sought to show that death concerns not only the physical body, as is commonly believed in everyday life, but also a part of our spiritual being. He claimed, at the moment of physical death, the bioenergetic double separates from a person, a phenomenon we call a ghost. But what happens next? According to Priima, during this separation, as if removing a spacesuit, the luminous astral body separates from the bioenergetic double. This astral body, having an oval shape, leaves the Earth's atmosphere. The soul, in fact, sets out on its journey to another world, leaving the physical shell behind and moving into a space that goes beyond the limits of our perception. Priima also described the fate of the bioenergetic double. This energetic framework served as a spacesuit for the soul during life. After death, it loses its function, and any remnants of consciousness that may have remained in it gradually disappear. In the end, the double dissolves into particles of light, and the soul goes further. Priima emphasized, this process does not happen instantly. The soul continues to exist despite the destruction of the physical shell, moving in a direction hidden from human perception. To explain this, he gave examples of ancient symbols. For example, an Egyptian drawing created more than 3,000 years ago. It depicted a soul leaving a human body and being carried into another world. The artist drew a death bird that carries the soul to a place where earthly laws do not apply. To make the truth even more convincing, Priima presented a photograph taken by his colleagues in the year 1992. According to him, this picture managed to capture the soul itself. For some, it was mystification. For others, proof. Questions that the deceased are forbidden to answer. In his book From One Secret to Another, Alexei Priima presents stories of people who have experienced clinical death. He describes in detail what these people see at the moment of death and why they return to their bodies. This experience became the foundation for his reflections on life, death, and what lies beyond the boundaries of our world. But it is important to understand, not everything that Priima recounted ended up in open publications. Many records were hidden away in KGB archives, marked as top secret. Rumors circulated that these documents described experiments on the release of the soul under hypnosis and the recording of its manifestations with special instruments. Officially, this was never acknowledged. Priima was convinced that people who had experienced clinical death had not actually been in the afterlife, despite apparent evidence. They only saw the entrance, he said. It is like standing on the shore of the Styx and not daring to step into the water. None of them had crossed the boundary completely. In his book, he gives a vivid example. One doctor met the spirit of his deceased mother in the garden. She told him that only her body had died, but she herself felt more alive than ever. Shocked by this event, the son asked his mother how she lived after death. The answer was unexpected and frightening. The deceased are forbidden to answer such questions. This phrase seemed like a code from another world. Priima claimed that in the other reality, such inquiries are considered impermissible. Both those who have experienced clinical death and the living can only see the entrance there, but are unable to know what lies beyond. He concluded, "Every person is born with a specific life plan, and they live on Earth exactly as long as is necessary to fulfill it. If the mission is not completed, the soul returns, sometimes in the very same place, in the body of a child born not far from the site of the tragedy." To confirm this, Priima referred to the research of Indian scientists who, for half a century, collected evidence of soul transmigrations. In half of the cases, these were people who had died prematurely. They returned in order to finish what they had not managed to complete. This idea seemed far too bold for its time, but then something happened that shook Priima himself. The story of Nikolai. Nikolai PSV Verka experienced what can only be called purgatory. At the edge of life and death, he found himself in a state that forever changed his worldview. For years he remained silent, afraid of ridicule, afraid even of his own memories. Only after 8 years did he dare to speak. In the summer of 1978, his heart stopped. The last thought before plunging into darkness was of his teenage son. How will he live without his father? And then came complete oblivion. But it did not last long. Suddenly, Nikolai realized that he was flying through a dark tunnel, his speed increasing every second, as if he were falling into infinity. He felt fear and at the same time incredible freedom. Everything that had restrained his life before had disappeared. I was moving so fast that I could not distinguish anything around me. Suddenly, ahead appeared light. It was blinding. I could not look directly at it. But soon the light became softer, and I realized that I was in a ward. Only it was different. Soft white light filled the walls, and from this came a sense of calm. The strangest thing was still ahead. Nikolai realized that he could see everything around him at once. He looked through walls, through objects as if the material world had ceased to exist. But the most painful discovery was another. He did not see himself. I could not understand what I looked like. This caused a terrible feeling of emptiness, he recalled. And then something even more frightening happened. Suddenly Nikolai realized that he could hear 5 people's thoughts. All their feelings, emotions, and experiences overwhelmed him at once. And when he thought of home, he was there. Instantly. He entered and saw his wife. He tried to tell her that he was alive, what was happening to him, but she did not see him. At one point, she simply walked right through him. And then Nikolai realized his reality had irreversibly changed. Later, Nikolai experienced what he himself called his personal purgatory. This experience was so powerful that even decades later, at the mere memory of it, he would tremble. "When I was outside my body," he recounted, "my whole life flashed before my eyes, from childhood, from the very first days. I saw everything I had ever done, but I saw it differently than before. Now every little detail was colored with a sense of guilt before my loved ones. It was not just annoyance, it was real pain and deep shame. Moments that in ordinary life had seemed insignificant, a carelessly thrown word, a small lie, something left unsaid, a display of indifference, now turned into unbearable weight. I tried to justify myself. Supposedly nothing terrible, everyone does it. But it did not help. You cannot deceive the soul when you come face to face with yourself. Every dishonorable act, every offense, every manifestation of selfishness, all of it returned to him not as images, but as sensations. He felt the pain of others, as if he himself had lived it. It was not a movie, and not a memory. It was reality. And this wave of others' suffering became unbearable. At some point Nikolai realized, this is hell. But not an external hell, not one invented by religion. This was an inner hell, something that a person creates for himself. And then he was swept away by an invisible force. It was like a powerful hurricane, Nikolai said, as if I had been hurled back into the dark tunnel. I flew rapidly, but the flight began to slow down. I saw the light, warm, inviting, but it receded. It was disappearing. Instead of it remained a feeling of loss, sorrow, emptiness. Then came the impact. He was pulled into his body. The return was nightmarish. His body was clammy, cold, foreign. It was not me, Nikolai admitted. I felt disgust toward my flesh, as if I had returned into an old broken suit. The contrast was staggering. There, freedom, peace, light. Here, heaviness, pain, cold. And it was at that moment he understood. The life we live on earth directly shapes what awaits us afterward. Purgatory is not punishment from outside, but a mirror of the self. This confession shook not only his family. Rumors spread that men in plain clothes had come to Nikolai. Neighbors noticed how an inconspicuous black Volga often stopped near his house. In the evenings, unknown men would visit him, and after they left, Nikolai would sit for a long time in silence, as if crushed by the weight of an invisible threat. The Soviet authorities officially denied such phenomena, dismissing them as religious obscurantism. But behind the scenes, things were different. The secret services closely studied every such case. Archivists familiar with Nikolai's case claimed that his story did indeed end up in KGB files. There it was considered not mysticism, but a possible psychophysical phenomenon that could be put to the service of the state. There existed secret protocols in which questions were asked. Can the state of the soul after clinical death be controlled? Can a person be forced to tell the truth at the moment of leaving the body? Is it possible to use such states as a weapon or a means of influence? These documents were never published. Many believe they are still hidden in closed archives. But the very fact that the secret services showed interest already said a lot. Nikolai felt his experience was not just a personal drama. He realized that he had become part of something bigger, too big for a human being to control. And he knew if his words ever reached people, they should make them think. Because true judgment is not carried out there, but within ourselves. Every day, every word, every thought forms the world into which we will one day enter. After returning, Nikolai remained silent for a long time. His soul seemed torn between two worlds. On one hand, he understood that he had survived only to tell his story. On the other, the fear of being considered insane or a fantasist literally paralyzed him. For years he kept his secret. Even to his colleagues, the doctors, he did not dare reveal what he had gone through. In Soviet society, such confessions could cost one's career, reputation, and sometimes even freedom. In the best case, he would have been mocked. In the worst, sent to a psychiatric clinic for re-education, but eventually Nikolai could no longer keep it inside. "I have no right to remain silent," he said. "This did not happen to me alone. This is a warning for everyone." He began to speak. His words sounded like a confession. "I saw that man does not die, that every action, every thought is a brick in the house we will one day enter. I understood that purgatory is not a place, but a reflection of ourselves. And if we do not correct what is within us, no one will do it for us. These revelations spread in whispers. Some listened to him with open mouths, others with disbelief. But the strangest thing happened later. Men came to Nikolai, not neighbors, not doctors, the very same guests in grey suits whom everyone in his town knew, people no one dared to question. They did not introduce themselves, did not show documents. They simply sat down across from him and began to ask questions. They did not threaten, did not laugh. But their cold eyes and manner of speaking left the impression of an interrogation. Did you see the light? What did you feel when you were outside your body? Is it possible to consciously control this transition? Did you have the ability to see the thoughts of other people? They recorded his every word. Sometimes they exchanged glances. Sometimes they paused, as if checking against an invisible plan. Only later did Nikolai realize his story was not just a personal experience. At that time, similar accounts flowed into closed archives. The KGB collected them, analyzed them, drew conclusions. For what purpose, no one knows for certain. Some are convinced they were searching for evidence of the immortality of the soul. Others, that they dreamed of turning it into an instrument of control. Imagine a power capable of influencing not only thoughts, but also what awaits a person after death. Nikolai, however, saw another meaning in this. They showed me, he said, that we all live with masks. But there, on the other side, masks fall away. You remain face to face with yourself. And if inside you there is malice, envy, hatred, then that is what will become your eternity. But if you have learned to love, to forgive, to help, then the light itself will meet you. I returned to say, this is not a fairy tale. This is law, and it awaits each one of us. These words sounded like a challenge, but also like a warning, and at that moment, his story turned from a personal drama into a message for each of us. How many grievances do we carry within us? How many times do we postpone a kind word for later? How many times do we live as if we had eternity ahead? Nikolai insisted, eternity does not begin tomorrow. It begins here, in every decision, in every glance, in every choice. The finale of his story sounded like an explosion. I passed through death to understand, no one assigns us hell or heaven. We build them ourselves. And if today there is darkness in your heart, then tomorrow it will become your home. But if at least once a day you choose the light, you are already changing your eternity. And here is the main question, from which there is no escape. And if today you were shown your own world, the one that awaits beyond life, would you want to remain in it? After Nikolai decided to speak openly, his life changed. He was no longer the same doctor, simply saving lives in an ambulance. He became a man who had touched a mystery, one that official science refused to acknowledge, but which the secret services, on the contrary, hungrily collected. In the small town, rumors began to spread. Neighbors noticed strange cars without license plates near his house. Men in grey would come and go, and every time Nikolai returned from those meetings pale, as if after an illness. They questioned me over and over again, he told his wife. They needed everything, the smallest details, my feelings, what I saw, what I heard. They were interested even in what I myself was afraid to think about, and every time I tried to understand, why do they need this, they would leave, leaving behind only cold and silence. Later, already in the 1990s, former archivists revealed, in the secret folders of the KGB, there really were materials marked of special importance. There were dozens of stories of people who had survived clinical death. Their interrogations, protocols, descriptions of visions, all of it was analyzed as meticulously as military reports. Some claimed the goal was to create a psychotechnology of immortality. Others whispered, in the basements of institutes in Moscow and Leningrad, Experiments were conducted to artificially induce out-of-body experiences in test subjects. Nikolai, of course, did not know all the details, but he felt his experience had not been in vain. He had become part of something greater, something that the authorities feared to make public, but could not ignore. "I realized," he said, "that we are playing a game where the stakes are too high. There, beyond the line, there is no state, no KGB, no superiors. There is only you and your soul. And if here in life you lived in lies, there you will have to look those lies in the eye." These words frightened people more than tales of glowing tunnels or meetings with the dead. Because there was no mysticism in them, it was too honest, and yet he continued. "I speak," said Nikolai, "not for sensation, not for fame. I speak because I know, at any moment, this can happen to anyone, and then it will be too late to justify, too late to regret. There you will be your own judge." With the years, his voice grew firmer. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had seen what others only argued about, and every lecture, every confession ended with words that burned. "Hell and heaven are not places on a map. They are mirrors of your soul. Do you want to know what awaits you? Look inside yourself right now." After these words, silence always fell in the hall. People looked down, someone began to cry, someone left, unable to bear it. But it was precisely this silence that was the main proof. Nikolai had touched the deepest core. Today, decades later, his protocols are still preserved in the archives. Scientists argue whether such stories should be believed. Skeptics dismiss them, calling them hallucinations of the brain. But one simple fact remains. Nikolai lived, he died, he returned, and he told. And now it is up to you, to believe or to turn away. For the main question that Nikolai left behind sounds like this. If right now you were shown your own afterlife world, bright or dark, full of love or full of pain, would you want to remain there forever?